The Exalted have been chosen by the great powers of creation, from the elemental dragons to the Death Lords, and given power like that of the gods themselves. A shard of imperishable might has been set within their souls, allowing them to master their internal essence and empowering them to slay monsters, lead armies, work puissant sorceries, and perform other deeds appropriate to the brightest of heroes. Once the Solar Exalted ruled the world, but they were cursed and fell and were slain, leaving the Terrestrial Exalted, commonly called the Dragon-Blooded, to become rulers in their place. In the earliest times, the gods became discontented with their lots as keepers of the world, tenders of creation and mere servants of the primordials. The primordials had created the gods, but with a mighty chaos laid upon them, such that the gods could not use anything that was divine, or any of the stars or planets or moons or turning seasons, to attempt to work the undoing of their creators. The primordials did not mention mortal life in the Geas, though, for they did not believe that any mortal could be a threat to them. The unconquered Sun proposed to his fellow incarnate that they should take the humans and give them great power so that they could fight as their champions against the primordials. The other incarnate agreed, and they went out and chose mortals to become heroes. These were the first of the Exalted. Gaia would create no soldiers, but she gave her blessing to the elemental dragons, and they raised up soldiers to serve as armies for the heroes, the Dragon-Blooded. Autochthon, also a primordial, and the first of all smiths, turned against his brothers and gave the Exalted designs for mighty weapons that could destroy the primordials. After the war with the primordials was concluded, the Incarnate took up the games of divinity, leaving the stewardship of creation to the Exalted. In turn, the Exalted took up the position that the Celestial Incarnate had once held, having authority over creation and the terrestrial gods. The Solar Exalted are the chosen of the unconquered Sun, created to be the rulers of the world and the leaders of all other Exalted. The Solar Exalted come in one of 5 castes. The Dawn caste are unparalleled warriors. The Zenith caste are priests and mystics. The Twilight caste are savants and sorcerers. The Night caste are spies and assassins. And the Eclipse caste are diplomats and ambassadors. The Lunar Exalted are of course the chosen of Luna, and they were the viceroys, generals, and strategists of the Solars, and sometimes their consorts as well. They are shapeshifters and hunters, warriors and survivors. Their power is divided in terms of the moon's phases. The full moons are generally warriors and lovers of battle. The no moons are keepers of lore and sorcery, and the changing moons are tacticians and shapeshifters and scouts. The Sidereals are the chosen of the 5 maidens, the most secretive and inscrutable of all the Exalted. They are advisors, viziers, planners, counselors, and masters of intrigue and the martial arts. Each Sidereal Exalted is chosen by a particular maiden, but they are never more than about 100 in total at any time. The Terrestrial Exalted differ from the celestial kind in that they can pass on their powers to their descendants. They were formed by the elemental dragons as foot soldiers to the Celestial Exalted. Separately, they are weaker, but when working together, the Dragonbloods can topple dynasties and menace even the mightiest gods into submission. A Terrestrial has one of the 5 elemental aspects: air, earth, fire, water, or wood. And at the recent destruction of the City of Thorns, the Deathlord Mask of Winters was shown to have dark exalted servants, and there have been increasing reports of such beings from all around creation. These so-called Deathknights are the subject of a terrible rumor, but little is certain knowledge. These are the Abyssal Exalted. Though the Terrestrial Exalted can pass on a heritage of power to their progeny, The power of the greater Celestial Exalted is too mighty to pass on through hereditary. Instead, when a Celestial Exalt is slain, the fragment of essence that grants him his power flees to a new host, granting her exaltation. Thus, there is a fixed number of each type of Celestial Exalt. It is important to understand that although the exaltation springs from a divinity and is clearly aligned with that god's influences, its maker has no natural control over it. Had this been otherwise, the gods would have merely been ordered by their primordial overlords to gather the power of the Exalted back up and been forced to crush their own uprising. Exaltation is a fire passed into the hands of man, a gift that cannot be taken back, and what the Exalt does after receiving it is governed by his will and vision alone. Among men, Exalted have no equals, for they were created to be the weapons of the gods in the war against those that came before the gods. When young, in her power, an Exalt might be mistaken for the miraculous child of a mighty god, or for a particularly talented thaumaturge, but as she matures, she far surpasses the potential of both. Each sort of Exalt is its own distinct being, but the following is true of all Exalted, from an adolescent Terrestrial to the most honorary of Lunars. The Exaltation grants a vast lifespan. The Mayfly Terrestrial endures only 2 or 3 centuries, while Celestial Exalted can typically live 10 times as long. In addition, the Exalted are nearly ageless. They endure, seemingly in the prime of their lives, until the very end of their long lifespans. Any Exalt who appears elderly is ancient indeed. The Exaltation grants tremendous vitality. The physical body of an Exalt is incredibly resilient. Exalted heal with incredible rapidity and are largely immune to disease and are intensely resistant to poison. An Exalt can endure the most incredible hardship and survive wounds that would ordinarily fell a mortal. The Exaltation demands heroes. Exaltation is a fundamental alteration of destiny that turns a mortal into a semi-divine weapon. To be capable of benefiting from the Exaltation's power, the Exalt-to-be must have already been an important destiny. No Exalt is unwilling to wield his power. The Exaltation is not a rational or moral force, though. It simply seeks out beings who can wield divine power. It could descend on the most pious of hermits or the most immoral of rascals, so long as the chosen one is of consequence to history and will put this might to use. The Exaltation is desirous of hale hosts. The Exaltation heal without scar and recover without permanent disability from all but the most terrible non-magical maimings. In addition, the power that inhabits the Exaltation is a military weapon. Though rare exceptions occur for those whose talent and destiny surpass their physical limitations, the vast majority of those who become Exalted are free of any serious birth defect and are generally superior physical specimens. Those who become Celestial Exalted are almost always of age to serve in the military, between 13 and 60, and possess full use of their limbs and senses. Exaltation knows no gender or ethnic preference. It desires only quality, base material from which to make a hero. The Exaltation is imperishable and inseparable. No known process can sunder the bond between soul and Exaltation in either Terrestrial or Celestial Exalted. In addition, the Exaltation is protective. As godly beings and creatures of magic, the Exalted suffer lesser or no effects from many magical powers. When a Celestial Exalt is slain, the power flees from her mortal frame and seeks out a new host. Only once has this succession of power been interrupted, when the Solar Exalts were slain and banished, and even then, that merely postponed their return until the current day.